Look at your hand right now. The color of your skin feels like the most natural thing in the world, like it has always been exactly this shade, like it was always going to be this way. It wasn't. Every single human being alive on Earth today is descended from ancestors who had dark skin. Not some of us, not most of us, all of us. And the story of how some of that changed, when it changed, why it changed, and what it cost is one of the most dramatic chapters in the entire history of our species. Here is what the science actually shows. Let's start with the very beginning. Before humans had the skin we recognize today, our earliest ancestors were covered in hair, like other great apes. Underneath that hair, the skin was pale. Chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, have light skin under their fur. Our shared ancestor almost certainly did too. But sometime between 1.2 million and 1.7 million years ago, something changed. Homo erectus, the early human species that would eventually lead to us, began losing body hair. The reason was almost certainly about controlling body heat. Running long distances in the African heat generates enormous amounts of warmth inside the body. Sweat glands across bare skin release that heat far more efficiently than sweat trapped under fur. But bare skin in equatorial Africa, under one of the strongest sun environments on Earth, creates a different problem entirely. Ultraviolet radiation destroys folate in the bloodstream. Folate is a vitamin your body absolutely cannot survive without. It is essential for building and repairing DNA, for developing the nervous system of a growing baby, and for producing healthy sperm. A severe folate deficiency in a pregnant woman can cause catastrophic birth defects in her child. In an environment of intense sun radiation, light skin is not just a disadvantage, it is potentially lethal to the next generation. So natural selection did what natural selection does. It favored dark skin, heavily, rapidly, and with enormous effect. Professor Nina Jablonski at Penn State University has spent her career studying the evolution of human skin color. In her landmark research published in the Journal of Human Evolution, she and her colleague George Chaplin created the first global map showing the relationship between sun radiation levels and skin color across indigenous populations. The pattern was striking, not just directional, but precise. The stronger the sun environment, the darker the skin of the populations who had lived there for generations. Jablonski concluded that dark skin evolved in our ancestors as a biological sunscreen, specifically to protect the body from losing too much folate under intense sunlight. And it worked. For hundreds of thousands of years, as Homo erectus and then early Homo sapiens spread across Africa and lived under the equatorial sun, dark skin was the human default. It was not one option among many. It was the only option that kept a lineage alive. Your ancestors, all of our ancestors, were dark-skinned for most of human history. This is not a social claim. It is a fact confirmed by ancient DNA analysis and the evolutionary record. Now here is where the story gets complicated. Around 70,000 to 100,000 years ago, a small group of Homo sapiens left Africa. The exact numbers are still debated, but the genetic evidence is clear. Every non-African person alive today is descended from a founding population that carried only a portion of African genetic diversity. And that founding population had dark skin, because that was the only version of skin Homo sapiens had at the time. They moved north, into the Middle East, into Central Asia, eventually into Europe, a continent where something fundamental about the environment was completely different from Africa. The sunlight was weaker. At higher latitudes, sun radiation is significantly lower than at the equator, especially in winter when the sun sits low in the sky. And here the math of skin color flipped completely. Dark skin, which had been an enormous advantage in Africa, became a problem in the north. Not because of skin cancer. Sun levels were too low for that to be the main issue. The real problem was vitamin D. Your body makes vitamin D when sunlight hits the skin. Dark skin, which blocks sunlight to protect folate, also blocks the sunlight that would otherwise make vitamin D. In low sunlight environments, dark skin can cause a serious vitamin D shortage, and that shortage is catastrophic. It causes rickets, a disease that softens and deforms bones, and made childbirth far more dangerous for mothers. It weakens the immune system. It breaks down the skeleton. So in northern environments, lighter skin, which let more sunlight through to make vitamin D, became a survival advantage, and natural selection began to favor it. But here is the part that will genuinely surprise you. This did not happen quickly, and it did not happen the way most people assume. For a long time, scientists assumed that when humans arrived in Europe 40,000 to 45,000 years ago, they fairly quickly developed lighter skin to adapt to the lower sunlight environment. The ancient DNA evidence tells a very different story. In 2015, a research team analyzed the DNA of 83 ancient individuals from archaeological sites across Europe, covering a period from roughly 8,000 to 3,000 years ago. What they found overturned the conventional picture entirely. Hunter-gatherers living in Spain, Luxembourg, and Hungary 8,500 years ago, people whose ancestors had been in Europe for tens of thousands of years, still had dark skin. They carried none of the genetic changes linked to the light skin of modern Europeans. Read that again. Humans had been living in Europe for 30,000 years and still had dark skin. The man from Labrana in Spain, a 7,000-year-old individual whose DNA was analyzed in 2014, had dark skin, dark hair, and blue eyes. Blue eyes, which Europeans had apparently developed early, and dark skin, which they had apparently kept for far longer than anyone expected. He looked nothing like the European populations of today. So what actually changed skin color in Europe, and when? The answer, according to the DNA evidence, involves two separate events. The first was the arrival of early farmers from Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey, into Europe beginning around 8,000 to 9,000 years ago. These Anatolian farmers carried a genetic change linked to lighter skin. As they spread across Europe and mixed with the existing hunter-gatherer populations, this change spread with them. The second event was the arrival of Yamnaya herders from the grasslands north of the Black Sea, beginning around 4,500 years ago. These Bronze Age migrants carried additional genetic changes linked to lighter skin and contributed significantly to the ancestry of modern Northern Europeans. The result was a patchwork. Different parts of Europe lightened at different times, through different migrations, driven by different genetic changes. And the process was still happening within the last 6,000 years, which is extremely recent in evolutionary terms. Professor Sarah Tishkoff at the University of Pennsylvania, whose team published landmark research in Science in 2017, found that the story is even more complex than the European picture suggests. Some of the genetic changes linked to lighter skin did not originate in Europe or the Middle East at all. Some of them arose in Africa and are extremely ancient, appearing in light-skinned sand populations of southern Africa, who may have carried these changes for up to 1 million years. Skin color, Tishkoff concluded, is not a simple on-off switch driven by one gene and one migration. It is a patchwork of dozens of small genetic changes, each with its own history, its own geography, and its own timeline. The same shade of skin can be the result of completely different genetic pathways in different populations. Now here's the part that should genuinely change how you see yourself. The skin color any population carries today is not ancient. It is not fixed. It is a snapshot of a process that is still ongoing, the result of where your ancestors lived, how long they lived there, what they ate, and which small genetic changes happened to appear at the right time and place. The man from Labrana had blue eyes and dark skin. Northern Europeans 8,000 years ago looked, by modern standards, more like people from sub-Saharan Africa than like modern Scandinavians. Skin color in Europe went from mostly dark to mostly light within the last 6,000 to 8,000 years. In evolutionary time, that is a blink of an eye. Your skin is not your identity. It is an adaptation. It is your body's answer to a very specific question. How much sunlight did your ancestors live under? For how long? And what did they eat? Every shade of human skin exists because it worked. Because somewhere, at some point, in some environment, it gave the people who carried it a slightly better chance at surviving and having children. Dark skin protected the body under the African sun. Light skin made vitamin D under the northern sky. Every variation in between is a different solution to the same problem of living on a planet with uneven sunlight. You are wearing the answer your ancestors gave to that problem. If this changed how you think about where you came from, subscribe. There is more where this came from, and you do not want to miss what is next.